Starwalker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, a podcast all about tabletop role-playing games from the perspective of the captain's chair. Greetings, gamer, and welcome to the Obsidian Monolith, a podcast in which I will build a Numenera campaign from scratch. I'm your host, like Starwalker. Today, I'll discuss how to wrap things up and end the campaign. So grab a pen, grab some paper, and get your creative juices going. It's time to create an adventure. Greetings, listener. Welcome to the final episode of the Obsidian Monolith, and this is episode 21 of Game Master's Journey. I'm so glad that you're joining me today, and this is a momentous episode. I've been doing the Obsidian Monolith for quite a while. I've been working on this for, it seems like forever, and sharing it with you, and finally today we're going to wrap things up. I'm going to share my thoughts about how to end the campaign and kind of tie everything up in a neat little bow at the end, assuming that's what you want to do. So the first thing I want to do is I want to let you in on some of the secrets of the campaign. And some of these might have been appropriate to talk about in the very beginning of these series of episodes when I was first talking about kind of the main ideas of the campaign. But the reason I didn't do it then is I was actually running this for a group of players, and I know that some of them were listening to these episodes, and I didn't want to completely spoil the campaign for them. But now that that is over, I am free to share the secrets. Now, some of the things I came up with very early, some of the things kind of evolved as I went through the campaign, and some of the things I came up pretty recently. So the first thing is, what is the Obsidian Monolith, and what's the deal with that, right? Because that's kind of what this whole campaign is based around. It's called the Obsidian Monolith, and from the very beginning I planned on exploring the Obsidian Monolith to be kind of the end of the campaign. Like, that's the point that we're working towards through the whole campaign, and figuring out kind of what the deal was with that was one of the first things that I came up with before I even started running the campaign. So the basic idea I came up with was I wanted to work with something from the time when Earth was part of a galactic, or maybe even a pan-galactic or intergalactic society. At some point in one of the previous worlds, we're told that Earth was part of something very similar, I think, to the United Federation of Planets in Star Trek, where we have a bunch of species and civilizations that are banded together as allies, and that Earth was either the kind of the center of this or was an important member of this larger society. So one idea that I was playing with in the very beginning of the campaign was, wouldn't it be cool to play with that a little bit? And the big idea was, well, maybe, Earth has some enemies out there. Maybe not every species, every, advanced species in the galaxy was part of this society, or maybe there were species from other galaxies or something, but somewhere there's probably someone that was not a fan of the society and was not a fan of Earth. And what if, one of those ancient enemies came to Earth now? The ninth world would have no hope of defending itself against such an advanced species. So I thought that was an interesting idea to kind of play with. And that's one of the first ideas I had when I was coming up with this campaign and shaped all the things to come. So I was very fascinated with the monoliths. We have the Amber Monolith and the Obelisk of the Water God. And one of my early ideas was that those are only two of many monoliths that are like that. And the idea I ended up running with, I had a few different ones, but the one I ended up running with was that during the time when Earth was the center of this galactic civilization. These monoliths were actually monuments, basically, and each one was a monument to a different species that was a member of this civilization. And so each species came to Earth and placed one of these monoliths on Earth as a monument to that species and their place within this greater society that Earth was part of. And the idea was, at least the ones in the area of the Steadfast coincided with species that came from the star systems associated with the Pleiades constellation. And the way that they placed these monoliths on Earth was such that on a specific day of a specific year, the arrangement of the monoliths coincided with the arrangement of the Pleiades in the sky. And so each monolith on that specific day pointed at the star that was the home of the species that built it. Now, because these were all placed on Earth by very different species, although the monoliths look the same in that they're the same size and shape, they're made from different materials, which explains why they're all different colors and look to be made from different kinds of stone or other materials. And they're all very different as far as if or what they do, if they do anything beyond just hover there, what that is, what's contained inside of them, and things like that. And one of my early ideas that, I may still play with this someday in the future was to make this kind of part of an Uber campaign where I would have a series of adventures devoted to each of the different monoliths. And I came up with quite a few different ones. And I decided to base this particular campaign on the Obsidian Monolith because it was the one I thought was the coolest of the different ideas of the different monoliths I came up with. And as part of this, to kind of avoid any kind of issues with anything that came out later about the Amber Monolith or the Obelisk of the Water God, is I decided that those are actually not one of these monuments. Even though they're in the spot and they look like them, they're not authentic. And so basically, what we now know is the Amber Monolith and the Obelisk of the Water God are edifices that were raised by a later civilization. So let's say this was the time of the Fourth World. I don't know what it was. I never decided that. But let's say it was the Fourth World where Earth was part of this galactic civilization, and that's when all the monoliths were put up. Well, maybe it was the Sixth or Seventh World that built the Amber Monolith and the Obelisk of the Water God. And what happened was the original monoliths either were destroyed or they left or something happened to them. And so the peoples that were in that area at that time erected new monoliths because, they had these landmarks that had been there for millions of years, and they wanted something there to replace it because it was weird not having this huge thing floating above your city or whatever it was. So in that way, the Amber Monolith and the Obelisk of the Water God have nothing to do with these, and anything that we know or learn about those has nothing to do with my monoliths. So the idea was that the monoliths would be different colors because they all came from different star systems. They were made of different materials by different species. And I was kicking around the idea of having them all loosely associated with a stone or something that's found on Earth. Like, for instance, the Obsidian Monolith is not made of obsidian. It's some alien substance that probably doesn't even exist on Earth or never existed on Earth. But it's just called the Obsidian Monolith because that's what it looks like, and that's the closest earthly analog to whatever it really is. I came up with some kind of general ideas about the other monoliths. I had one that was called the Monolith of the Dawn, and it was kind of a purplish pinkish color, kind of like a sunset or a sunrise in certain parts of the world. And I had, the Emerald Monolith and the Ruby Monolith and things like that. And again, one of my early ideas was, even for this campaign, is having the PCs visit these different monoliths. But then I realized that, one thing is really cool and unique, but as soon as there's 6 of them, they're not cool and unique anymore. And I thought that the campaign would get a little kind of boring if they're exploring all these different places. It'd be really hard to present all those monoliths in ways so that they're all very unique and it's not just same old, same old. So I decided for this campaign to just focus on one of them, which was the Obsidian Monolith. And so I developed more of what the Obsidian Monolith was and where it came from. So basically, I tied this in with another idea I had for the game very early in my Numenera days, where I came up with an alien race that I called the Eilodon. And the Eilodon are basically similar, morphologically speaking, to octopi here on Earth. And they are a super intelligent alien race that came from one of the stars of the Pleiades. They are a underwater race. They are telepathic and telekinetic. They are ridiculously smart. They are aware of dimensions beyond the 4 dimensions that we're aware of, other spatial dimensions. And they're super cool and they're super advanced, and they were part of this galactic civilization, and they are the ones that built the Obsidian Monolith. And all the monoliths are different as far as what they are and what they do, but the Obsidian Monolith is actually kind of sort of like a starship in that it can travel through time and space. The Eilodons had a much better concept of space-time than we do. We tend to see it as 2 different things, even though we know that it's not, where they just, the way they perceived it was they always realized that it was just one thing, and that's kind of how they interacted with it. So the Obsidian Monolith travels through space and time. It doesn't really have propulsion like we would think of it. It is able to travel by a combination of warping space-time and also an ability to actually be in multiple places at once, or at least seem to be in multiple places at once. And again, this has to do with the Eilodon's ability with other dimensions and their understanding of those other dimensions that are beyond our perception. So one of the other secrets of the campaign was why the Order of Truth wants into the Obsidian Monolith. So towards the second half of the campaign, as I briefly went over last episode, the PCs are approached. They want them to go find Sir Arthur because Sir Arthur is the only person who knows how to get into the Obsidian Monolith. And at least in my campaign, the PCs weren't really given any reason why. They didn't bother to ask why the Order wanted in the monolith, so of course I didn't tell them. But if the PCs do ask, what they're told is that there's a lot of potential information, presumably within the Obsidian Monolith. The Order doesn't realize that it has no connection to the Amber Monolith. It's the obvious assumption that it does because they're the same shape, they're the same size, they float the same distance off the ground. So it's very natural to assume that somehow they're connected, even though in reality they're not at all connected. And the Order learned a lot from the Amber Monolith. They're still learning things from the Amber Monolith and the facility that it connected to. And so they assume that they will learn that much more from the Obsidian Monolith. And they aren't going to tell the PCs this, but they want power. And this is an area where you as GM, if you're running this campaign, you could go different directions with it. You could just do that. Depending how you kind of see the Order of Truth yourself, you could do it as they just want more power for themselves, and they think if they get access to this, that they will have more power, and that's what it's all about. Another way you could go, and this is what I decided to do for my campaign, is that there is an invasion force coming. So again, I mentioned the idea that Earth has these ancient enemies from long, long ago, and one of those enemies are sending an armada of ships to presumably destroy Earth and everything on it. I mean, who knows? But it's pretty scary seeing an armada of interstellar ships coming towards your planet when you have basically a medieval level of technology. So the Order of Truth is a little worried about that. They can see them coming through various Numenera devices that they have. They know that they're on their way. and they know that they will be powerless to do anything to stop it. And there is a legend that the Obsidian Monolith is somehow able to protect Earth from pretty much anything. So that's a way you can go. And basically, the way that works is I came up with the idea that the solar system is just filled with these tiny nanites that are or were part of a defense system for the solar system itself. And basically these things are everywhere. I mean, there's countless numbers of them, and any hostile force that enters the system, these nano machines can just basically disassemble the ships on a subatomic level. So that's there, but they haven't been used or maintained or anything for millennia, and so they've kind of powered down and they're dormant. And the Obsidian Monolith, among the many things it can do, is it can control and activate those. So you could run it that the Order wants the PCs to go in and do that. So that's one way you could go. So the campaign ends with the PCs exploring the Obsidian Monolith. And if you remember, I started this campaign with the Windmill in the Woods, which was a very classic Numenera, go into this facility and explore it, and we see all these strange things, and we encounter all these dangers, and we fight ancient security systems and stuff like that. And I don't know if something can become a cliche in less than 2 years, but it seems like that is like the Numenera cliche now. That is kind of what you expect from a Numenera adventure. And one of the cornerstones of Numenera is the idea of mystery, and that the PCs should never really understand anything completely, right? And that's something that I really dug when I first got into Numenera, and I think that it has its place. But I think, especially when you're talking about the end of the campaign and you're talking about high tier characters that are extremely capable, I think that you owe it to the PCs. And I think the PCs will very much enjoy actually coming to some degree of understanding. I mean, obviously they're never going to understand everything, but just giving them a little bit, I think, can be very rewarding at the end of the campaign. And I think that if I would have done another, dungeon crawl through the discovery kind of thing like I did with the Windmill, that it would seem very same. And, they did that at tier 1. They don't want to, at the end of the campaign, do something they did at tier 1. So I decided to make the exploration of the Obsidian Monolith very different, so that it doesn't fall into those tropes. So again, I have different ideas of how it could go with the Obsidian Monolith, and it's up to you or anyone running this to decide which of those ideas they want to go with, or if they want to do something all their own. But I think not to give you anything and just say it's a mystery is kind of a cop-out. So I came up with a few different possibilities, different ways it could go. So really the hard part isn't in dealing with the monolith itself. The hard part is actually getting inside, which has gone from impossible to possible thanks to the help of Sir Arthur, who tells them how to get inside. And I will have more about this when I put up the blog post that gives more of the details of the adventure. But basically it involves a multi-step puzzle that has to be solved in order to open the monolith, and he knows how to do that. So once the PCs enter, they find the monolith to be a strange place. They see that the interfaces are very similar to what they saw in the Windmill at the very beginning of the campaign. And again, this is kind of, bringing things back around and giving it some internal cohesion. It uses the same fractal language. So if any of the PCs spent XP to learn that in the first adventure, then they will find benefit from that again. They notice that all of the chambers and all of the halls within the monolith all have 8 sides instead of 4. So, you think of a chamber like what we would have, you have, 4 walls and ceiling and floor. These would have 8 instead of 4. So that's kind of a clue as to the origin of the makers of the Obsidian Monolith. I think it's possible that one of the reasons we always see 4-sided rooms is because we have 4 limbs, maybe. I don't know. But I thought it reasonable that a species with 8 limbs would make 8-sided rooms. Why the hell not? The different chambers within the Obsidian Monolith have variable gravity fields, and there are some that have no gravity. So you might go into one room and you're completely weightless, and the other rooms, up is down, or up is down. Down is different directions depending what room you're in. Also, there are some spatial weirdness going on. Again, they have mastery of other dimensions. So, there are rooms within the Obsidian Monolith that seem way, way too big to be within the Obsidian Monolith, but they are. And as the PCs are exploring the monolith, almost as soon as they enter, they hear a voice, almost like an intercom voice that seems maybe to be speaking to them, or maybe just speaking in a loop. It's hard to tell. But as they explore, this voice is speaking in a language they don't understand, and with some good intellect type rolls, they can figure out that it's actually changing languages. It's not just speaking the same language. It's kind of cycling through dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of languages. And basically what's going on is this is the artificial intelligence of the Obsidian Monolith trying to communicate with the PCs, and this thing is programmed with thousands of languages from all the civilizations that were part of the galactic civilization. And over, a few hours or whatever of the PCs exploring, it is trying to communicate with them in all of the languages it knows. Now, once it has done that, and it, none of those languages are the truth, of course, then it starts monitoring the PC's communication and basically learns their language. So at a point that the GM feels is dramatically appropriate, the voice shifts from whatever incomprehensible language it was just speaking and starts speaking in the truth and can be understood by the PCs. Some of the chambers I forgot to mention are also filled with water. Again, kind of a hint as to the origins of the species that built the Obsidian Monolith. So until the PCs, or until the AI starts speaking a language the PCs understand, they're kind of just wandering around this place, exploring it. You can feel free to come up with all kinds of wondrous things that they see. Again, trying to break the tropes. I did not put anything dangerous inside the monolith. I did have some danger outside of it. It's surrounded by gravity fluctuations and electromagnetic storms. There are a bunch of plasmars surrounding the Obsidian Monolith that feed on the energy it attracts, and they may or may not be hostile to the PCs depending on how you want to swing it and how the PCs interact with them. I also did a thing where as they were approaching the monolith, they were actually shifting between 2 different time periods. One of the time periods was the present, and then the other was in the distant past, where the area that they're on is ocean. Luckily, my PCs were flying at the time, so suddenly being in ocean wasn't as hindering to them as it could have been. But once they get in the monolith itself, there's not really anything dangerous. Just weird, amazing things like shifting gravities and rooms that seem too big and technology that they can't comprehend. And basically, once you feel like they've kind of had a fill of that, or you've given them all the cool ideas you came up with, you can have this AI suddenly start speaking their language. And at this point, they can have a conversation with it, and they can get a lot of their questions answered. The AI has been alone for millennia. It's not crazy. I don't think artificial intelligences would go crazy. I think that's kind of silly, actually. And if nothing else, it's a cliche. So it's not crazy. It's perfectly sane. And it is very happy to have someone to talk to. So it's more than happy to answer questions that the PCs give it, if it can. It has almost limitless access to information. It's able to interact with at least one of the many data spheres around Earth. So it can even acquire more information than it has at its immediate disposal. But one thing to keep in mind is the idea of frame of reference. And even though they're speaking the same language, there are going to be concepts that are very natural to the AI that the PCs have no frame of reference to understand and won't be able to understand. And similarly, there are going to be things that are very natural to the PCs that the AI may not understand because it doesn't have a frame of reference. So that's something you can play with as a GM to kind of have some issues of communication there. So they're able to learn from the AI that it is an intelligence that inhabits and operates the Obsidian Monolith. That the Obsidian Monolith, as I said before, is a vessel of sorts, able to travel through both time and space, which this would be one of those frame of reference issues because the AI will not see time and space as separate things. So it may take the PCs a while to realize exactly what it means when it says that the vessel can travel anywhere they want to go. It was built by the race called the Eilodon, who are very similar to Earth octopi. And again, I leave that up to you and your game to decide if they're related or if it's just a cosmic coincidence or if maybe they're even the same race and our octopi were brought here by the others or something. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do there. They learn that it's from one of the stars in the Pleiades constellation. And basically all the things I've just outlined to you, they can learn if they want to. And one way you can go with this, depending kind of how you're spinning this in your campaign, is you can kind of start to impress upon the PCs how powerful this facility is. I mean, with its control of space-time, eradicating the Earth would be the smallest of things it could potentially do. And depending how you handle the Order of Truth, you could have the PCs maybe come to the realization that this may not be something they want in the Order of Truth's hands. Definitely the way I interpret the Order of Truth, in my world, you would not want the Order of Truth getting their hands on something like this. It would not be good for most people, I don't think. They learn that the AI wishes to return to the Eilodon homeworld. So it's been here alone for millennia. It's been millennia since an Eilodon has come to Earth, and the AI wants to know what happened to its creators. It wants to interact with the species that created it again, and so that's what it wants to do. It wants to go home, basically. However, the Obsidian Monolith is kind of tethered, for lack of a better term, where it is. And in order for the AI to be able to leave, there's basically a manual override that has to be engaged by someone outside of itself to basically free it from its moorings so it can go wherever it will. And so that's what it wants from the PCs. It wants them to disengage this override so that it can be free to maneuver wherever it wants. Now, obviously, the PCs may be suspicious. They may be afraid to give this free reign, especially if, like me, you used an encounter where they met a dread destroyer who was kind of giving a very similar plea of, please free me from this restraining bolt so that I might be free, but it did not have good intentions. The first thing it was going to do was level all the major cities in the world. So it might be a hard sell to get the PCs to go for that. As a bargaining chip, the AI can tell the PCs about the armada of alien ships en route to Earth if they don't already know about it, or if they do know about it, it can offer to activate the nano field for them. Now, if the PCs, for one reason or another, do decide to free the AI, then they have a lot of options. They find that the AI was not lying to them and it truly does just want to go home. So they could leave and be safe in the knowledge that the monolith is going to leave Earth and presumably will not come back. And they don't have to worry about the Order of Truth getting their hands on it. Or they could choose to stay on board and go check out the Eilodon homeworld, which hopefully, playing Numenera, that's what they would choose to do, right? So originally, way back when I planned this campaign to be a lot longer than it ended up being, and like I said, I was even kicking around the idea of having numerous campaigns tied together. And part of the reason that didn't happen is because my group that I was running kind of started to fall apart. I had a couple guys who were in Australia. I had one guy in Canada. We just had very different time zones. I lost a couple players because they just couldn't do the time anymore. It wasn't a super convenient time for me either. So we had those issues. And also, I had originally, thought about publishing that, and I decided against that, and decided that, if I ever did do anything with this, I would want to do it independently, with my own system or without a system, so that, I wouldn't be under anybody's boot and I could do it how I wanted. So kind of halfway through the campaign, I shifted gears from this idea of a very long campaign to a shorter campaign. And so at that point, when I was thinking it would be longer, what I was originally thinking is that exploring the Obsidian Monolith was actually going to be about halfway through the campaign, which, as far as character development wise, that's how it turned out. My PCs were, I think, tier 4 when they got to it. So, that's about halfway. If I would have gone all the way to tier 6 or even beyond, I kind of wanted to go beyond tier 6 and try out how that works, if it does. So the idea was that they would go to the Isladon homeworld, and then the campaign would actually finish out there, and I would have things to do at the Isladon homeworld. And so this was an oceanic world, and the idea is that the Isladons are gone. So when they arrive there on the monolith, the remains of their underwater cities are there, and some of their technology is even still functional, but there's no sign of the Isladons, and there's this mystery of what happened to them. Did they somehow go extinct? Did they leave to go to another world somewhere, or another galaxy, or another dimension? Who knows? But you basically have this whole new world that's oceanic. I mean, there is some land. There are some islands and small continents here and there. You have these huge cities that are under the water that have all this crazy technology, and basically this whole new world to explore. Now, once the PCs arrive on the Isladon world with the Obsidian Monolith and the AI realizes that they're gone, the next thing the AI wants to do is it wants to go look for them. So if the PCs want to stay and explore the Isladon homeworld, they might be able to convince the Obsidian Monolith to wait a little while, but it's not going to wait forever. Although, an AI's conception of time is probably different than ours, so even getting it to wait a year might not be that hard of a sell. And maybe it could gather fuel or things from the homeworld that it might need if it's going to go explore the multiverse looking for the Isladons. So they could convince it to wait for them and explore a little bit, or they could just say, hey, go on, we're gonna stay here. And if they did that and they ever wanted to go back to the ninth world, you can always, have there be a portal or something that would actually make sense, since they were all part of this civilization together, this kind of federation type thing. Or they can decide to go with the Obsidian Monolith and go explore the galaxy. That was kind of where I envisioned the campaign ending, the original longer version. Have that be the final scene as they fly off into the great unknown to go see even more wondrous things. Or you could keep going and come up with what they encounter out there in the galaxy and between the galaxies. So that's what I came up with, and that's how I ended it. And again, there's different ways you could go. You could end up on the Isladon world and have a whole campaign there. You could end up flying around the galaxy and have a whole campaign doing that. Or the PCs could decide just to let the monolith go and stay on the ninth world. Or they could decide not to free it ever and surrender it to the Order of Truth, or keep it for themselves. I mean, there's so many ways it could go. But the things that I think are the key points here, as far as how I decided to end it, is that I'm kind of bringing things around back to the beginning. I'm tying things in to the very first adventure with the windmill. They're seeing the same technology. They realize that the windmills were built by this race, and that at least at some point they were somehow connected to the Obsidian Monolith, or the Obsidian Monolith was like a control center for the various windmills. And basically my idea is that the windmills were just gathering energy. They were gathering like some kind of exotic particles, like neutrinos or something even more exotic than that. And they were deriving energy by gathering those, and they transmitted that to the Obsidian Monolith. So that's kind of what I was thinking with that. But the point is that it kind of brings things into a circle in a way, which I really like stories that do that. So things that were kind of mysteries in the very beginning are now answered to some degree, and things that we saw in the beginning, we now see again at the end, and it kind of bookends the campaign and makes it fit together so that it seems like it's a coherent thing as opposed to just a string of random adventures. So hopefully that's helpful to you as an illustration of how you can create a campaign and how you can have these ideas at the very beginning and carry them through to the end. A lot of these ideas, changed a little as I ran the campaign. I was constantly revising the end as I went. And then some of the ideas pretty much stayed the same the whole time. And I was able to do this without railroading the PCs. They always had choices of what they wanted to do. And we had a lot of fun with it. So again, I have companion blog posts for these Obsidian Monolith episodes. So if you go to starwalkerstudios.com/blog, I am getting all of the written material for the campaign up there. So if you're wanting to run this yourself, or if you're wanting to just get more on it so that you can take certain parts of it and use it or riff off of it or whatever you want to do, there's a lot more details in those posts than what I say on the actual episodes. And it may take me a few weeks to get the rest of them up. I'm caught up to the Machine of the Emals. I have all those up to there. And I still have probably a few more that I'm going to put up of various things to give you about the campaign. So definitely check that out. Well, that is going to wrap up the final episode of the Obsidian Monolith. I had a lot of fun with this, but I have to say it feels good to get it done. And honestly, it feels really good to wrap this up so that I can talk about some other games. I feel like I've said everything that I can say about Numenera at least 3 times now. So I'm really excited to talk about other games. I'm really excited about Season 2 of Game Master's Journey. I am right now working on an interview with some gentlemen about the Fantasy Flight Star Wars systems. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm hoping to run and play some more Star Wars myself in the future. And also in Season 2, I am planning to begin my world building series. So that will be similar to this. They will be supplemental episodes to the show. So I'm going to do, the regular Game Master's Journey every week. And then every once in a while, I'll do a bonus episode in which I will discuss world building. And kind of like I did with this, where I discussed creating a campaign and I kind of created one as an example, I'm going to do the same thing with world building. I'm going to create a world and kind of bring you with me on the journey of creating this new world. And hopefully it will be helpful to you. If you would like to reach me, you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker, and you can find me on Google+. Just search for Lex Starwalker. Please visit our website, starwalkerstudios.com, where you can find the show notes for this and all the episodes. You can find my blog posts about the Obsidian Monolith campaign. You can find a link to our Google+ community page and all kinds of stuff, including our other podcasts. And finally, if you would like to help support the show and help us keep the lights on, we would greatly appreciate it. And an awesome and very easy way for you to do so is to take a test drive of Audible books, courtesy of Game Master's Journey. And you can go to audibletrial.com/gamemaster and sign up for your free trial. You get 30 days and 1 book free. A book I highly recommend is the book Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. And this is the first book in a series called The Expanse, which is a space opera series, but it's more mundane sci-fi, which is to say there's no warp drive, there's no time travel. It's pretty realistic and believable stuff, more near future kind of stuff. And it's a really good series, really fun to read. And there's going to be a sci-fi TV series based on it coming out, quote unquote, soon. Not sure exactly when. That I am very much looking forward to. They have some awesome people working on that and cast in that, and I think it's going to be really good, and I'm looking forward to it. But you can check out the books now. There are 4 out so far, and the 5th is coming out in a month or 2. And there are also some short stories in the universe as well, which I just started reading myself. But yeah, check out Leviathan Wakes on Audible, or you can check out any other book on Audible. I've yet to look for a book there and not find it. So they have an awesome selection of books. So once again, I want to thank you for joining me on my Game Masters journey. I hope that you learn as much from listening to this show as I've learned making it. So I will see you next week for the Season 1 finale, Episode 22 of Game Masters Journey. And until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Masters Journey.